Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to Bescheuertes kurzes Bein, and I'm here with Anindya Dutta, um, author of Wizards, the story of Indian spin bowling, which is basically the definitive book on Indian spin bowling, I would say.
Very
And
kindly.
well, as we say in German, Ehre wem Ehre gebührt. Honor those that deserve it. Something like that. Um, Yeah, well, maybe you tell us a bit about who you are, um, how you got into writing about cricket, and then we can talk a bit about your background, my background, how we got into cricket, how we got in touch, and how we got into this alternative cricket media thing that we are now doing, something like that. I think the listeners might appreciate something like that.
Sure. Thank you very much, Leah, first for inviting me to the podcast. It's an honor, and no, it's absolutely an honor to be on the podcast and talk about cricket to a German. It's weird if you like. If we hadn't known each other for a while, I would have felt very weird with starting the conversation with a German on Indian spin bowling. But yeah, to answer your question, I was a banker most of my career, so about 27 years, a long time to spend in banking. For the last about 4 years, from a work standpoint, I've been running a leadership consulting firm. A lot of the work of that is driven by sports, so there is the connect with sports. From a writing standpoint, I started writing maybe about 12 years ago, which is not too long if you think about it. I used to write, of course, before that, but I never wrote on sports. So it
Mm,
was just one fine day. I read an article by someone on an Aussie website, of all things.
mm,
And my first thought was, this is such crap writing. How can someone publish it? Right?
mm.
With due respect to whoever that writer was. But again, my thought there was maybe I could write something, and if this can be published, mine can be published as well. So let's see what that's like. And I wrote something which wasn't very good, to be fair, but it got published. So I was like, okay, there's enough people to read what I write. Looks like. But what was interesting was there was a lot of feedback from readers who wanted to engage and who appreciated what I wrote. So which is of course always encouraging, and so I kept writing. And then one day I got a call from the editor saying that one of their regular authors wanted to talk to me. And it turned out that that author was Kirsi Meher Homji, a writer who I had grown up reading, of Indian origin but settled in Australia. And Kersey had read one of my articles and then went and read a few more. And he wanted to speak to me because he wanted to say that he thought there was a book in one of the articles that I had written, which was on spells, bowling spells. And that conversation, where I basically told him that, look, I really respect what you do, but I don't know the first thing about writing a book. I cannot possibly convert 1,000-word article into a book. And he said, trust me, I've written 14 of them. There's a book in this. Right? And so I did the real naive thing, if you like, the real simple thing. I asked him, so how do you do it? Teach me how to do it, because then I can try. And he said, everybody's got a different style of writing, but this is how I work on mine. You have to find your own way of doing it. And that led to the first book that I wrote, which was Spellbinding Spells, which did rather well. Because it did rather well, although it was, self-published, it was relatively low key. But then, because people started talking about it, one of India's major publishers noticed that, and they got in touch with me asking if I wanted to write on Indian spinners.
Mm-mm.
And that's how Wizards came into being. I wasn't planning one, so I told them what I really wanted to write was on the Indian spin quartet.
Mm.
So Vishen Bedi, Prasanna, Chandrasekhar, and Venkat, who I had grown up watching. But they said, look, if you're going to do that, there isn't a book which is really uh, up to date and which is deeply researched on Indian spin bowling itself. So
Mm.
why don't you make an attempt at just writing that? And so I took that on without realizing how much work it would be. But in the end, long story short, whatever, 18 months, 24 months later, we had Wizards. It went on to win India's Cricket Book of the Year award.
Mm.
So, that got me some love among readers, and that's where we are.
Excellent. That's a fascinating story, and so I don't think we ever really talked about how I got into cricket as a German, because I'm actually German born and bred.
I wouldn't tell from your accent.
Oh, thank you very much. No, I was fascinated by cricket when I saw, as a little kid, I saw a picture of a cricket match being played in front of a English mansion, and I didn't really know what it was, but it looked interesting. It looked fascinating with the people in white and the wickets and the bats and stuff like that. It was a typical, maybe late 19th century scene.
English summer scene.
Yes, exactly.
And you were in Germany. You grew up in Germany.
Yes, I grew up in Germany. Yes, it was on the package of tea time rusk with sugar and anise, and the packaging design contained this picture of cricket. Later on, of course, I really got into Douglas Adams and The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and in the third book of that series, there's a lot of allusions to cricket.
Right.
And when I then got into university and got basically for the first time real, access to English daily newspapers in the library, that was in around 2003, and then the Ashes 2005 happened, and I was hooked then.
Of course, I can understand why. Yeah.
Yes, and then the IPL started, and I really got into that, and then I had to move to Munich, and Munich was a really difficult time for me. And what really helped me in that time were cricket podcasts, mostly by Jared Kimber. Obviously, Kimber has I have a special connection to Kimber because he wrote an article on Medium, which was basically Substack before Substack came into being.
Yeah.
He wrote an article about Marcus North Saves Lives, was the title, I think, about him and his buddy, his mate, bullshitting about cricket, which convinced another friend of his to not commit suicide and instead come out as transgender the next day, because she had actually made plans to kill herself. And
that must have been very powerful. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That was very, very powerful. And then the pandemic came, and everyone was confined to their homes. So I used to tweet into Guerrilla Cricket a lot back then. That's when the connection there started. And from then on, the idea was, why don't we have something like that in German? And I said, you can sit around and mope about not having that, or you can
Create one.
do something yourself. Start a podcast, and I did that, and apparently there is a listenership in German. I got a lot of feedback of German people that say, okay, I really got into cricket very, very recently, and it's really interesting to have German content about cricket, explaining the history and everything else that's heavily intertwined with cricket, which Germans do not really know about. Because we do not have the connection to former English colonies or British colonies. We do not see the socio-political implications in something like the West Indies team of the 70s and 80s and stuff like that.
Of course.
Yes, and
there is no cultural context to that.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. The only cultural context for cricket in Germany is actually CB Fry trying to convince Joachim von Ribbentrop, Hitler's Secretary of State, to make cricket the German national sport. Which yes,
I absolutely didn't know that.
Yes.
When was this?
It was I think in 38.
Okay.
Somewhere around that. Because CB Fry was actually very enamored with fascism, which led to the British establishment after the war basically telling him, you shut up.
Yeah, not surprised.
Yes, the idea was shut down because Hitler thought that any sport needing that much personal protective equipment to be very un-German. Yes.
Well, I can believe Hitler thinking that. Yeah. Okay, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. I'm very glad you got yourself into cricket and you've now got more and more German listeners into cricket, because more the merrier. It's a great game. Of course, we'll say that, but the more people who understand it, the more people who talk about it, the more people who play it. I think it's good for the sport.
Yes, and I think it's also really, really important in Germany right now, because with the refugee crisis, there were a lot of people coming to Germany from Afghanistan. And I think it's very important. It's a very important tool of integration, of cultural exchange. So the Germans can also understand a bit of the culture that the Afghans bring with them. Because integration is not a one-way street.
Of course not. Of course.
And I think that's really important for German society as well, in that sense.
Yep. And maybe someday you're going to have a German team half full of Afghans, which go and beat Pakistan.
Well, we actually did have one player in the German national team, the only player in the German national team that actually played official one-day internationals. His name is Davlatsai, and he had to flee Afghanistan. He was in the national team before, and he after that played for Germany, but only T20s.
Okay,
because
I have heard his name, but I didn't know he played for Germany afterwards.
Yeah, he played for Germany, and he's now a coach. He's got a coaching license here in Germany. Isatullah Davlatsai.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and I actually made a lot of friends here in Germany. In now I live in Hanover, and we actually do have a team here. It's mostly expats from India and Sri Lanka, of course.
Of course.
But there are actually German members there as well. Yeah. Um, so another question I would like to ask you is how you got in touch with Guerrilla Cricket, because you are obviously one of the main contributors to coverage of Indian matches on Guerrilla Cricket, if there are any. So how did you get in
Yeah,
touch with them?
yeah. Again, I think it came through Annie Chev
Mm,
because I got in touch. I can't even remember how Annie and I got in touch, but county cricket is something that I've always been hugely influenced by because, a lot of the work that I did on sports history, on cricket history,
mm,
naturally involved county cricket. Even if you look at it from an Indian cricket standpoint, traditionally, a lot of the Indian test players have played county cricket. And I was actually also a very big fan of someone like Headley Verity.
mm,
So I did a lot of research. I've written a lot of articles on Headley Verity, and uh, it's just something that fascinated me. So when I found that Annie was very passionate about county cricket and she was trying to do the work that she was doing,
mm,
I helped her when she first started the magazine County Cricket Matters. I wrote a few articles for that. I got a couple of cricketers to write articles for that, etc. And then I took it upon myself to publish a Kindle edition of that
oh,
from the first edition. And so I've been publishing every Kindle edition since then.
mm,
So when it comes out, typically Annie will send me the file, and I'll put it on Kindle with all the pricing, etc., so that people around the world can
mm,
also read it. Uh, so that's how it started, and then I think Annie introduced me to Tony Bishop,
mm.
and that's how I came across Guerrilla Cricket. And Tony and Hendo were really nice enough to tell me that, why don't you come into one of the broadcasts,
Mm.
and it went from there. So it's a lovely bunch of people. Not everyone gets along with everyone else, which is the fun part of it. Everyone has divergent views, but what makes it fun is, people like you coming on board, Leah, where
Mm.
you come in as a listener, you become a part on certain broadcasts, and the way we engage with people, with listeners, I think is very, very special. That
Absolutely.
and the quality of the analysis. And I have a lot of respect for some of the commentators who are a part of guerrilla cricket. Absolutely humble people, but the quality of their analysis, I think, sometimes far exceeds the analysis that you get on regular big media broadcasts. And the fact that we can make it accessible to everyone to listen to us as they deem fit, and there's such a big group of people who are purely volunteering their time and effort to make it happen for the love of the game, I think that's that's the beauty of guerrilla cricket.
Yes, absolutely. I have to agree with that. And something that guerrilla cricket does that traditional broadcasts don't really do is, and that is, I think, um, a consequence of the global pandemic when a lot of guerrilla cricket had to go um, video conference.
Yes. I mean,
Is
I wouldn't be here with guerrilla cricket if that had not happened, right?
exa-
I mean, I live in Singapore. There's no way, I could ever have got into a studio anywhere to do commentary.
exactly that. But now there's people cooperating on the coverage from Australia, from Austria, South Africa. Um, there were USA commentators.
Yep. And
I'm in.
strange countries like Wales and Scotland sometimes,
Yes,
Ireland.
yes, exactly. Um, but I think the real important thing is that it's not geo blocked, that you can access it from everywhere.
Exactly. Yeah. exactly. And you could listen to it. You're in the US, going to work. You listen to it on your radio. I mean, I think it's just fantastic.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, yeah, so now people know a bit more about our backgrounds. Um, the sad part about Wizards at the moment is that it's not available. But I have heard that you are planning a second edition. Is that right?
Yes. So I'm commissioned to write a second edition. I've been commissioned for about the past 8 months, and I have to confess, I haven't done much work on it for a couple of reasons. One is I've been very busy with trying to make my um, consulting business work, so
Mm.
I've not had so much time. But also, it is increasingly difficult to speak to the modern players
Yes.
and I've been making as much effort as I can to speak to the young Indian spinners, or some of the older ones who I missed out the last time
Mm.
for a very simple reason that they didn't know who I was, so they had no interest in speaking to me. I've not been a journalist, so I had no credentials.
Mm.
Now they know about the book and they've read the book and they're happy to speak. So I've ended up speaking to a few of the people I wrote chapters about earlier. So I should be able to beef up those chapters, which would be amazing because, getting their own perspective on certain things, especially spinners who had difficult lives and
Mm.
who didn't really make their talent count. So you always wonder and you make judgments about why sports people, when they have the talent, don't actually achieve what they could have achieved. And then you talk to them and you realize certain things happened which only they tell you. And it's not apparent to other people, right?
Mm.
So a bit of the narrative, I think, from existing chapters will change because I've spoken to a couple of the people who are really sad stories of Indian spin bowling, if you like. Two of the
Mm.
most talented people. I'm not going to talk about who they are, but two of the most
Mm.
talented spin bowlers India's ever produced, but who really didn't make it to the level that they could. And then I have now started to get a couple of the younger guys to talk to me.
Mm.
I had one lovely, lovely conversation a few months ago with Yuzvendra Chahal.
Oh.
So which was great. I mean, he's a fantastic guy. I mean, he's just so much fun as a person,
Mm.
and he'd tell you story after story if you ask him. So he's one of those rare sport people who are still playing and who would very freely talk about their life and their sport. And some of these guys have really thought hard about their skill, about their craft, and they're happy to talk about that, which is great. So yeah, there's still some work to be done. Couple of people I'm trying to get pulled off to speak to, and I hope that in the next 3 to 4 months I can write this piece,
Mm.
and then maybe by middle of next year the book can be published. So that's my hope at the moment.
Yeah.
Long answer, sorry, but
No,
you did
no,
ask.
no. This is fine. This is fine. And congratulations to speaking to Yasvendra Chahal. I know he's been a favorite of yours for a very long time.
Yeah,
Um,
he has. I think he's got real talent, and there's a lot of talk about why he doesn't get to play in the World Cups,
mm,
and it's pretty weird because he gets picked for all the bilaterals. He doesn't get to play in the World Cups for some reason.
yeah.
But I think one of the reasons also is that in white ball cricket today, teams expect bowlers to be able to bat a little,
Oh
and
yes,
and
yes.
Chahal's probably the weakest of the lot in terms of his batting. So, but he's a very optimistic person, so he takes it in his stride.
Yes, I remember him giving Chris Gale betting tips during an IPL season, if I
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
correctly, where that was a really
He's
fun
not shy.
picture.
Let's
No,
put it this
no,
way.
he doesn't seem to be.
Yeah. So that's what's going on with Wizards. Yeah.
Excellent. So everyone, keep an eye out for the second edition of this book, soon to be updated. um, yeah. Let's have a look at the time. We've been talking for about half an hour now. Yes. So I know that the World Cup is probably a bit of a an open wound still. It is for me as well
Indeed.
because I'm also a fan
Rohit Sharma.
of Rohit Sharma, yes, and of India as a whole. Because when I got into it, I thought, well, I mean, I got into cricket really seriously into cricket with the Ashes 2005, but I didn't really like the players on the teams that played in the Ashes. Ponting seemed a bit of a prick. Flintoff was a bit,
Was
well,
definitely a prick.
yeah, and the Indian team at the time had players like Rahul Dravid and Sachin Tendulkar, of course.
Yeah.
So I gravitated towards them, but yeah, very unfortunate. So I'm an India fan.
Yeah,
In
thank you
international
for that.
cricket.
I know you've been a big supporter. It's very unfortunate what happened in the World Cup, but the reality is that they played very well for 10 matches.
Yes, they
Uh,
did.
they were the best team in the World Cup by far in those 10 matches. On the final day, in my view, a couple of things happened. One is the probably the BCCI had a role in it, and I'm not
Oh,
ruling out the fact that Rahul Dravid had a role in it as well in choosing the kind of pitch they wanted to play in, whether they admit it or not. And it was absolutely stupid to ask for, if that is what they did, in asking for a turning track at a venue where the curators have less experience of than, say, at a Wankhede Stadium in Bombay or a Calcutta or a Delhi or a Bangalore, of turning out wickets in the way that they're supposed to turn out. So as a result of which, I think what happened was, instead of a turning track, what they did was they created a slow wicket, which worked completely against the way India plays, because you've got fast bowlers, you've got batsmen who love the ball coming in onto their bat. It's the last thing in the world that you want, a slow wicket. And I
yes.
think what also happened is that before the match, the team management did not prepare well for the fact that they might have got a wicket which was not exactly what they wanted. So either they misread it, or, which is bizarre to me, because if Pat Cummins can read a wicket, I don't see why Rohit Sharma can't read the wicket, right? I mean, there's no logical explanation for that.
No.
So my assumption is they were ill prepared for anything but the kind of wicket they thought they would be getting. And as a result of which, they had no plan B. So when things went wrong, as they tend to do,
Yes.
they were unable to get out of it, and just went deeper and deeper into it. And then, KL Rahul got stuck in a KL Rahul way, where the entire tournament he'd been playing well, and then suddenly he sort of became afraid and started defending a bit. And then you had someone like Surya Kumar Yadav come in completely out of his element, clearly panicking in a setup which should have been tailor-made for him, because it was a T20 situation. But he just completely fell apart.
Yes.
And yeah, so that was it. I think they lost the match at that point in time.
Yes. I think they did, and I'm sorry to bring it up again, but
Oh, it's okay.
yeah, but because one thing about the World Cup is not necessarily the last World Cup, but there has been a lot of talk going around about the future of World Cups in cricket, of 50 over World Cups. A lot of people are saying that 50 over cricket is dying, that the next World Cup cycle will probably be the last serious World Cup cycle. And I'm not really sure about that, but I would really like to hear your opinion on that one. Will there be more cricket World Cups after the next cycle? They tried to expand the tournament again after contracting a few years back. What do you think? Will there be further 50 over World Cups, and will they still be relevant?
Okay, let's tackle the last part of the question first, right? I think if you go back a few months, I would say mea culpa to myself saying that the 50 over format had outlived its existence and it needed to change. There was good reason for that, because before the World Cup, you had a few years of 50 over matches. You leave aside the 2019 World Cup final, what happened, etc., right?
Yeah.
But if you look at it broadly, 50 over cricket had become extremely boring. The middle 20 overs or middle 15 overs was so formulaic, nothing was going on, right? I mean, people would just, take 2 runs, 3 runs and over and just bide out their time before they went out to hit again, right? So you had sort of a T20 on both ends with nothing in between. It was very, very boring, what they were. So I thought there had to be a change either in the format or in the rules or however, just to make it more interesting for spectators. Now, what changed in this World Cup was that I think different teams decided to play in different ways. So India decided to play in a very aggressive manner up front and at the end. And in between, they were scoring at a reasonably high rate as well, right? So they just upped the ante a little bit. You had, Australia playing in a very traditional one-day way, which I think is the reason why the one-day format was dying, because Australia plays it that way. So I'm not a fan of that. But then you had England trying to really do something about that with their whole baseball thing. Unfortunately, they fell apart.
Yes.
So you had different teams trying different things, which made it very exciting. So 50 over cricket became exciting during the World Cup, not because of narrow results in the beginning, but because of the fact that any result was possible, if you like.
Yes.
You had upsets, more upsets than you normally do in a World Cup.
Yes, absolutely.
Maybe because everybody was playing everybody else, n number of times. So you had a lot of matches which gave statistically a scope for upsets to happen. But eventually, you had Netherlands winning a few matches. You had Afghans going and, beating people. You had, various teams winning, right?
Yes.
So I think it's had a revival, and it's found new fan base. And this is again something I want to just digress on a little bit, because people in England and Australia do not understand this, despite me trying to explain to them for the last few years. The success of cricket is not dependent on how many people show up at a stadium.
Exactly.
It is as simple as that, right? If that's what you think, you are 10 years behind the game. Because if you agree with the fact that the commercial capital of the sport is in India, and I know everybody agrees and everybody hates it, especially the Aussies and the English, absolutely hate the fact that they ran that game in exactly the same way for 100 plus years, and now they don't. So I think it's a real problem for them to have third third world colonized country, take over what they had. But the reality is, away from that, that if you agree that the commercialization has gone there, how has the commercialization moved? The commercialization comes from sponsorship. It comes from the money that is going into live streaming, the money that is going into television coverage, where advertisers and sponsors are able to get their money's worth. Nobody honestly cares whether 10,000 people show up at a stadium or 30,000 people show up at a stadium, other than the players and
Yes.
other than a few purists like ourselves.
Yes, exactly. Because the more important part is obviously if you have 500 million or 750 million people watching on television or on the internet.
Absolutely, and that's what happened during this World Cup. You had single matches. 50 million people were watching single matches.
Yes, and
I mean that's just staggering, right? 50 million people watch, and these are not finals or anything. I mean, just single matches between two nations. 50 million people watching live.
Yes, exactly, and
that's the success of it, not the 10,000 people sitting in the stadium.
Exactly, and I don't have the numbers for the final, but I guess in the final there were more than 50 million people watching.
I'm sure.
I'm pretty sure it's in the triple digits of millions, because that one is watched around the world, and the Indian domestic market alone is so big, with India playing in the final.
Yeah. So that's the reason why I think you will, because that audience is enjoying the 50 over game, and just with the young people I interact on Twitter, etc. The fact that the only thing they understood was IPL, the only thing they appreciated was T20, and suddenly you see them have an opinion on 50 over cricket, right? Suddenly you see them enjoying the game, talking about it, like how good it is. And you see young players who have grown into international superstars playing T20 cricket suddenly come in there into the 50 over format and have an epiphany where they understand that they have a lot to learn and it's a different format. So you've had the transformation during the World Cup of 50 over stars coming in, figuring out that the the T20 stars coming in, figuring out that the 50 over format requires them to play in a mix of T20 and Test cricket. And that can only be good for the game, right? Because you're right there, you're connecting the three formats of the game.
Exactly.
Which is what makes me hopeful that it's going to survive.
Yeah, me as well. I really enjoyed the World Cup. I did as my listeners will know, I did daily roundups of the matches in German. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, it was a bit much for one person alone sometimes, but I really enjoyed doing it.
Well done.
And I really hope that this continues, that the World Cups continues, and maybe that's what the ICC also saw, that there is a revival of interest in the 50 over format brought on by these global tournaments. Perhaps that was the reason for them to announce the return of the Champions Trophy.
Exactly.
Which
after pretty much confirming that it was dead, right?
Yes, exactly. For all we knew, it was dead. It was replaced by the World Test Championship final, by the 2-year cycle for that one, and the final in the World Test Championship. That was, I think they said it explicitly.
Sorry. Can we just interrupt for a second? I'm
Yes.
sorry. I have to interrupt for a second.
and we're coming up on that now. So, yeah, we were talking about the Champions Trophy coming back. So
Yeah.
I think that's really that's the only reason I can think of that they announced it during the World Cup that it was coming back, because they saw the resurgence in interest in 50 over cricket there.
Yeah, that's correct. There's no doubt that that's the reason. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think if you look at also the T20 World Cup coming up next year and the timings that they're trying to have for that in the US and West Indies, again, I think people in England and Australia are just going to scoff at this, but you're going to have at least half the matches being played at India prime time.
Yes.
And that's where the money is. So we just have to accept the fact that the sport needs the money, and we need to be smart about how we go about expanding the sport to make sure that commercially it is successful. Right? That's the only way it's going to grow.
Yes, but I don't think English people will scoff at it, because for English people it is a very convenient time to play matches in the Caribbean. It's like test matches in the Caribbean are very, very good for the European market.
That's true.
Because they start at around.
Of course, the time zone is
4.
more or less the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's extremely convenient for us as well. So I don't think the English people will mourn too much
It's the
about
Aussies.
that.
Never make the Aussies happy, right?
Yeah, no. But they're so far away from everyone. Their timings are absurd for everyone involved. I was watching the last Border Gavaskar Trophy, and because I did summaries for that one as well, and that was really bad timing.
Well, when I was a kid, we would wake up at 4:00 in the morning to listen to the radio for the Australia series when India went to play there, and it's an abiding memory of childhood for me, because it was just, even in winter, it's very cold, and in Calcutta it gets reasonably cold in winter, and you wake up and at 4 in the morning you put on the big radio which your grandfather had, and you tune in to the commentary from Australia, and it's just such a lovely part of growing up with cricket. So yes, the time zone difference was very apparent from when we were kids, and India prime time clearly is not very good for Australia.
No, exactly. They were doing the commentary until around 3:00 in the morning, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that was very. I mean, guerrilla cricket, White Line.
Yes, exactly.
It was really very dedicated of Russ and the entire team there. Hats off to them.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. All right. I think that'll do it for this interview. Anindo, thank you very, very much for being my guest here on Bescheuertes Kurzes Bein. Do you have any last words to say to the listeners?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me there. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. In terms of last words, watch cricket, love cricket, spread the word, and support India.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.